Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers, and you are here for the continuation of Season 4 of the Wrestling at Random podcast. The randomizer has selected quite a few episodes of weekly television shows from all across the professional wrestling landscape. We haven't had too many yet that have hearkened back to the entire theme of Season 1 of the podcast, which was pay-per-views, major shows, TV specials, stuff like that. But this week's show definitely does. It is WWF's St. Valentine's Day Massacre from 1999, which I will be honest, we'll get to it on the show. I did not remember the existence of this show until probably the last 2 minutes of the main event.
I definitely did. I watched this show live.
Oh, wow.
And this is the pay-per-view, WWF St. Valentine's Day Massacre from February 14th, 1999. This was the February pay-per-view spot. So it's gone by many different names over the years. This is the one incarnation of St. Valentine's Day Massacre. So if you're looking for it on the WWE Network or Peacock, you can search by that name. It's only going to pull up one. And this one is in that spot between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania. So it's where you finish, you're on the road to WrestleMania. You finish rounding out the rest of the card and the top matches for WrestleMania.
Isn't it technically considered an in-your-house? When I was looking it up, even though it's not marketed as an in-your-house and it is a 3-hour pay-per-view, it's listed in many places as like in-your-house 27 or something.
It was in that transitional period where they were going to the 12 pay-per-views, full length, full price pay-per-views as well. So this one was in 1999. We are in the wrestling war, but we're at peak McMahon Austin here. We are peak WWF momentum, and WCWing themselves out of first place in the Monday Night War.
Yeah, and we're at the point in WCW's trajectory where they are desperately trying to be the WWF. And that's honestly one of the things as we go through this show that was sort of in my mind watching it is how different this is than WCW shows from sort of the peak Nitro era of WCW pay-per-views, in that there's no blowaway matches as far as like cruiserweight matches or like really good technical matches. And then I think of how WCW went away from everything that made them work, tried to do TV shows and pay-per-views like the WWF, but didn't have the production, didn't have the type of wrestlers, the type of stars, all of that. And so it just ended up being the worst you could possibly be, a cheap copy of something that's hot. And here we have the genuine article of, for better or worse, depending on your wrestling taste, a very hot product.
Absolutely. This is white hot, and this is a great crowd packed into the Pyramid in Memphis, Tennessee. This event sold out several weeks in advance, broke all Memphis wrestling records, which go back a long time.
Yeah. By the way, Memphis, we should mention, you want to talk about Memphis wrestling records and going back a long time. One of the best episodes, I think you and I both agree on that we did in the bonus feed for our patron/Apple Podcast bonus supporters, covering a classic episode of Memphis TV in 1985. It's funny to see here. This is in Memphis, sold out. Many people also talk about the booking of the Memphis territory and of the TV in a lot of ways was the forerunner of, and maybe in some ways even an influence on, the type of television WWF produced around this time.
Absolutely. If you haven't heard that episode, make sure you go subscribe. Patreon.com/wrestling at random. You can, for the lowest tier, it unlocks the entire back catalog, not just that Memphis episode, but like 90 some episodes of extra bonus content you have not heard, all waiting patiently for you in the bonus content over at the Patreon. Or if you're listening via Apple Podcasts, you can click the subscribe button. That unlocks all those episodes that are labeled bonus in your feed, and you can listen to every single one of them. Highly recommend the Memphis one. Definitely one of my favorites. And the WWF is in Memphis, like I mentioned, breaking records. 19,028 fans in the pyramid, of which 17,977 were paid. So that's a house of 316,618 on the dollars, and another $140,215 worth of merchandise as well. So a huge show here in the show between the big shows of Royal Rumble and
Yeah,
WrestleMania. So
that
they are
tells
white
you
hot.
exactly. It tells you how hot they were that a show like this, a pay-per-view with no sort of name cachet value, was able to do as well as it did. Uh, as far as the actual, you talked about the crowd in arena. I love the way the arena looks here in that it's a little bit different than your normal major size arena, and it is brightly lit. You can see how big the crowd is. It's always one of my frustrations with modern wrestling or even UFC, where they have these huge crowds and you don't see it. They bathe the crowds in a certain type of light, or it's darkened, but you can see everything here. Also, this is pre-Titantron, at least for pay-per-view, so you have a very, very basic set, which I actually like, because again, it gives you more of the sense of feeling like you're in this specific arena rather than the cookie cutter sort of aesthetic.
Yeah, there's a lot of good production to show off the crowd. There's a lot of camera angles, like during the DX intro, when they're doing their shtick. The camera's panned far back, the hard camera, so
Yeah.
you can see at the bottom of your screen the ring, the wrestlers, but then the crowd just keeps going up the top of your screen, and it looks like just it's packed, because it is, and they do justice to how crowded it is. Great lighting, great production. It's a WWE, WWF product, so it's to be expected. And what's funny is I'm pretty sure the Pyramid in Memphis now is a Bass Pro Shop.
Really? Is
Yeah,
that
because
the biggest Bass Pro Shop in the world?
yeah, I believe it's a Bass Pro Shop now, and
Wow.
yeah, because they any events that were running the Pyramid now run at the FedEx Forum, which is over there on Beale Street there. So um, Jerry Jerry the King Lawler, Memphis legend icon, is on color commentary, joining play-by-play man Michael Cole. This was during Jim Ross's one of his big bouts of Bell's palsy, so he's off the show, hasn't been around in a while, and wouldn't return until calling the main event of WrestleMania 15.
Yeah, that explains it, because as this show goes on, I was struck by not only was Jim Ross not here on play-by-play, we don't see him in any capacity. I believe he's mentioned in passing twice by Michael Cole, and I was wondering if it was what you described, or if it was just one of the times where he and Vince had a falling out, or one of the times where he said he doesn't look young enough, we have to take him off TV. But yeah, Michael Cole, Jerry Lawler, the commentary team, that will be an adventure at times throughout the show. Also, we should note ring announcer Howard Finkel.
Yes,
And
so excited.
we see him a few times, which is shocking, because it's always surprising whenever we have Howard Finkel for one of these late 90s WWF pay-per-views, because you just feel like they had phased him out earlier than then. But we've talked about before on these sorts of shows, even into the early 2000s that he's on, they will never show him, because again, too old. We got to have young people. But here we see him several times, and it just makes me so happy to hear that voice doing the ring announcements.
Yeah, I'm always thrilled. It always seems like a big deal when you hear Howard Finkel. What a great ring announcer. The lone dark match on the show, Brian Christopher and Scott Taylor, the team of Too Much, defeated Matt and Jeff Hardy.
Wow.
The Hardys were heels in that match because Brian Christopher from Memphis, Tennessee.
Was that when the Hardys were managed by Michael Hayes?
I do not recall, but possibly.
It was a very short window, but what a time that was. Seeing Michael Hayes
In Hardy
dressed
pants.
like a Hardy boy is it's like, did he get that fashion from the Hardys? Is he the influence behind the Hardys look that's lasted some 20 plus years? Who knows?
The pre-show for this was Sunday Night Heat. So Sunday Night Heat, we've reviewed it in the past on on this podcast. Sunday Night Heat was the pre-show for this, so there was a couple matches there. Viscera defeated Test via disqualification, and Billy Gunn had a no contest with Tiger Ali Singh. So
Tiger Ali Singh. Wow. Talk
if you
about a name.
skipped Heat, you didn't miss anything from the match standpoint.
Well,
We'll talk about some of the angles later as the show unfolds.
Well, also, if you tuned into this pay-per-view at the beginning, you would be forgiven if you thought you were watching Sunday Night Heat, because this is, for all intents and purposes, a two-match show.
Yep.
We
will blow through the undercard, which was not good. We spent hours watching this, and we're going to spend 15 minutes recapping it.
Yeah, the undercard was pretty awful. We talked about the differences between WWF in their hot era versus WCW in their hot era as far as pay-per-views. Totally on display here. As I mentioned earlier, there's nothing even close to what you would think like as a great undercard match. No. Not only that, the crowd does not care about any of these men or any of these matches. You might get a slight pop for their entrances, but otherwise they don't care. And part of it is this is during sort of the height of the shades of gray era of the WWF. And so many of these matches are just a guy that you could not possibly cheer for as far as his actions against another guy you could not possibly cheer for. And none of them are big enough stars that transcends their, their otherwise heelish ways, like a Rock, for example.
Your opening match, Goldust against Blue Dust, who is the Blue Meanie of ECW fame.
Oh, God. Another one of those things that I had completely forgotten about his brief run, not only his brief run in the WWF, but as Blue Dust, where he comes out to the same music that Goldust does. So the music just repeats after Goldust makes his entrance. And he's wearing like blue airbrushed pajamas as he wrestles Goldust here.
Teddy Long is the referee, and I love this time period where we're trying to figure out, is Teddy Long going to show up on the show as a manager, as the general manager, as a referee? You never know where you're going to get Teddy Long. Today we got him as a referee.
And the later you see him, the younger he looks. Pro Wrestling's Benjamin Button.
That's right. He has the reverse J.J. Dillon syndrome.
Yes, exactly. Can I just mention, because I have no comments on this match. It sucked. It was boring. No one cared. There are a few things here commentary-wise. First, Michael Cole says for the first of, I would say, at least 20 times on this show, that this is the most emotionally charged WWF pay-per-view ever. So that was clearly the WWF phrasing, WWE phrasing. Even back then, this was a thing that they were told to hammer home time and time again. Also, at one point in this match, Michael Cole calls Blue Meanie, Blue Dust, a tremendous athlete.
Yeah, I did have that in my notes as well, with a lot of question marks. Yeah, this is a nothing. Goldust wins with a horrible version of his curtain call finish, and then kicks him in the balls. The Shattered Dreams after the match. Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter with a harsh review of this match. He says, quote, "Comedy that wasn't funny and wrestling that wasn't wrestling. So bad that even keeping it short couldn't prevent it from being an embarrassment. -1 star."
I miss harsh Dave. I agree. I also feel like it's the type of thing that we'd see so many worse matches in the years to come, particularly even in WCW 1 year later. But yeah, as far as a pay-per-view opener, which is supposed to set the tone, get people excited, you always hear the only match as important as the main event. First show is the opener. We've had some incredible opening matches that we've reviewed here on this podcast from promotions all over the world on pay-per-views. This was not that.
No, we get a clip from Heat where Vince McMahon was trying to get Austin to hit him so that he could get him fired and the match would be off tonight. McMahon even spits in Steve Austin's face, but Austin says that he will wipe the spit off with your blood. As we go to our next match for the WWF Hardcore Championship, Al Snow versus Bob Holly for the vacant Hardcore title. This was like cartoonish violence. compared to the last man standing match that we were going to have later. I was already like, we're going to have a last man standing match later tonight. Why do we have a hardcore match on this same show? And it's like, oh, because this is silly hardcore stuff, hitting each other with plunder and fire extinguishers and nonsense. This was
with almost no story behind it. They were both members of the Job Squad that are fighting over the hardcore title for some reason. It was also like both the WWF and WCW and their hardcore divisions completely missed everything that made ECW interesting, which is funny because that's what they were trying to copy and tap into with this. Like you said, I mean, they fight backstage, they fight outside, they fight down to the river, and they're fighting on the bank of the
Mississippi River
for approximately 3.5 hours. My favorite part, though, is leading to the finish where there's this big like roll of chain link fencing that's not attached to like actual fence posts. Bob Holly is trying to undo this chain link, trying to unroll it. It's rolled very tightly, and he can't get it, and he audibly drops an F-bomb, walks away. They continue brawling, and then 30 seconds to a minute later, they go back to that spot, literally and figuratively, and all of a sudden, the fencing is unspooled. That ends up leading to the finish as Hardcore Holly wraps Al Snow in the fencing, gets to the pin. So clearly all the other people they had around were able to unroll that fencing during the intervening minute. But it was just that
then we had to wait.
The highlight of the match.
We had to wait for Bob Holly to get from the banks of the Mississippi River all the way back into the building to celebrate with the championship. This was a waste of time. The Undertaker's in the back. He's meeting with his Ministry of Darkness. He tells Mideon to, quote, take the boss man's soul. So we'll see how that goes tonight.
Yes, this is backstage segment, if you can call it that, with the Ministry of Darkness. At this point, the Ministry is The Undertaker, Paul Bearer, Viscera, Bradshaw, Farouk, Ron Simmons, Christian, Edge, and the former Phineas Godwin himself, Mideon, or I guess I should say, as this next match started, which was Mideon versus the Big Boss Man in 1999, they say Mideon was formerly known as Dennis Knight, maybe to his parents and to the DMV, but he was never, no one would know him as Dennis Knight. I mean, they could have said Phineas Godwin
of any kind. Yeah.
They could have even said that he was Tex Slazenger, and more people would have known that than would have known that he was Dennis Knight.
So, yeah, Mideon comes out carrying a jar with an eyeball in it, trying to be creepy. My favorite part of the match is Boss Man throwing some awesome punches.
Oh,
and he starts yelling, Ministry sucks ass. He is correct in his analysis.
Boss Man is awesome here. He's the exact same guy that he was in the early 90s. He's wearing SWAT team gear instead of a police officer getup. I'm already going to spoil for you. My most hated part of this show is the generic music that he has instead of the Big Boss Man music. This guy was great still back then, but he was treated like such a nothing. Yeah, this is another one of those matches where is the Ministry a babyface group? Because we know the corporation with the Big Boss Man
are heels.
Like, why are these guys fighting? Why would the crowd have a rooting interest other than wanting to see them both collapse?
Well, and the crowd chants boring, and they are correct in their analysis as well.
I felt bad for Boss Man.
Boss Man hits a Boss Man slam for the win. Still a great finisher, and it was always my favorite finisher in the WrestleFest arcade game.
Yes.
So big fan of the Boss Man Slam.
I'm also a fan of Michael Cole talking about how earlier in the day he had a conversation with Mideon. Just trying to envision that in catering.
Yeah, the Ministry came out, surrounded the ring after the match. The Undertaker with them. They attack the Boss Man 7-on-1, and no one from the corporation comes to help, and they carry the Boss Man to the back.
I mean, I thought that was the most believable part of this show: a corporation not helping people they're supposed to care about.
It would have been a fun game to play before this pay-per-view to say, guess who was in the corporation at the time of this pay-per-view, because it's such a random, weird group of people.
The sad thing is that I don't think King Kong Bundy is part of it. He was part of the $1 Million Corporation
Yes,
4 years prior.
But any faction that has Ken Shamrock and Kane and Chyna in it is obviously a well thought, well put together group.
It's funny because they don't even mention during the Shamrock match, which will be coming up later, they don't even mention that he's a part of the corporation. That's another one of those matches, Ken Shamrock and Valentine's, where I have such a hard time figuring out why I'm supposed to be rooting for either man.
No, and you shouldn't. We'll get there. Next month will be WrestleMania 15. We get a commercial for that. Kevin Kelly is in the back with Ivory, Mark Henry, and D'Lo Brown. They are coming for the tag team titles against Owen Hart and Jeff Jarrett. Ivory is who they brought in to offset Deborah being in the tag team champions corner. And we get the introductions for the tag team championship. And this is Sexual Chocolate Mark Henry era. Oh, yeah.
Great entrance music.
It's sexual, baby.
The following contest,
I don't want to give it
scheduled
all
for one fall, is for the World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Championship. Introducing first the challenger, to be accompanied by Ivory,
And I'll tell you
at a combined weight of 668 pounds, D'Lo Brown, and Sexual Chocolate Mark Henry.
Oh, what a tremendous opportunity for this young team of Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown. Last night on Raw.
WWF Tag Team Championship, Sexual Chocolate, Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown with Ivory as the challengers against Jeff Jarrett. Owen Hart, the tag team champions with Deborah. Owen Hart is way too cool to be hanging around with Jeff Jarrett. That's what I learned in this match.
The idea of those two guys as tag team champions in a division where you had other really good wrestlers that they could have good tag team title matches with doesn't bother me. But Owen is so much better than this match and this feud and this tag team division. It's also kind of shocking to me in that this is, I mean, very sadly, 3 months prior to Owen Hart's passing, and he still is wrestling as Owen Hart. I had forgotten that he was still, I thought that whole Blue Blazer Redux started a little bit earlier than it did.
It starts right around this time.
Okay.
It's because it starts pre-WrestleMania here, I think. But yeah, not a lot to this match. Very paint by numbers tag team match here. Owen ends up hitting Mark Henry in the knee with a guitar. No powder or anything in this guitar shot, so this is Deemer approved on the guitar shot.
Someone must have slipped a different guitar to Jarrett, because we know that doesn't happen on his watch. You have the powder in the guitar at all times.
I was happy that there was no powder. Jarrett,
I like to think it's a long line of vintage Mr. Fuji guitars. That's
the
Jeff
the
Jarrett
ceremonial salt.
Yes, the Jeff Jarrett somehow inherited through his long history in wrestling, but he didn't have access to one right here.
Jarrett puts on the figure 4. Mark Henry submits. They're still the tag team champions. After the match, Ivory rips the shirt off of Deborah. She uses the tag titles to cover herself up as she walks out.
I just wanted to jump in with a couple quick notes on this match. There wasn't a ton to it, but I thought, for one, Owen looked like casually great here. He had nothing to sink his teeth into, but he still was just great Owen Hart.
Yeah, 60%. I felt like maybe 60% energy out of Owen, and it's still one of the best performances on the show.
Yes, it was house show Owen here on this show of pay-per-view performers was still better than pretty much everyone else on this show up until maybe the last 2 matches. Also, just a quick shout out to D'Lo Brown, who I thought looked fantastic in this match.
Yeah,
worked his ass off when there was no reason to. He had an awesome sky high counter of a leapfrog that just looked great. And he was one of those guys back then that you thought, man, if he was in a company that had more really good wrestlers he could have really good matches with. He could be that like mid-card workhorse that could give you 3.5-star matches every time out. And we saw glimpses of that here.
Mankind's with Kevin Kelly in the back. They show on Heat earlier, Mankind was training for his match by running stairs with Bob Backlund, the Iron Sheik, and Dominic DiNucci.
He was not just running stairs at these men. This activity has a name. It is called the Harvard Step Test.
The Harvard Step Test. That's right. And The Rock came with like a trash can, a weapon of some sorts, and
he also had a pallet, like a grocery store dock pallet.
Attacked Mankind, injuring Mankind's knee. So he's got an injured knee because in a last man standing match, if you can't stand, you can't win. So he went right for the knee to injure it. Dislocated, we heard later in the show.
Yeah, dislocated knee. We also heard a broken kneecap at one point on this show. It's either of those things seem to make it impossible to walk mere hours later. But we'll get to it. I'll also have thoughts, particularly for those people who are patrons and heard our recent show. If you're listening in linear fashion, talking about the Halloween Havoc 1993 Texas Death Match between Vader and Cactus Jack, which ostensibly is the same thing as the Last Man Standing match. I think we'll both have thoughts about the rules here versus the rules as they were in that match. And for my money, how much better and easier to understand this rule set on this show was for that type of match.
We get a video recapping the Val Venus Ken Shamrock feud. Basically, Val is hooking up with Ken Shamrock's sister, Ryan Shamrock, which is funny because Ryan Shamrock is actually being played by Ken Shamrock's real life girlfriend. So his real life girlfriend is playing his sister in this.
This is, I guess this may be, actually, now that I think about it, I'm wondering if Jack White was a big WWF fan at this time, because the White Stripes would emerge just a year or two later onto the scene. And this feels very Jack and Meg White in the lore and history there. I just want to mention also, before we got to that, we found out that if you send in your cable or satellite bill, you can get a free photo magnet from the World Wrestling Federation.
Special referee for this next match is Badass Billy Gunn. Mr. Ass is the peacekeeper. And he's got 2 words for you. And he does his whole intro shtick. And then we have the Intercontinental Championship match where the challenger is Val Venus with Ryan Shamrock taking on the champion Ken Shamrock. The match started hot, like they were in a fight, and this was fun. And then it slowed, and it really dragged when Val Venus was on offense. This got like I don't think I've seen a match go from great intensity, great fight off a cliff like this did for Val's slow and boring offense.
Now, to use terminology that Val Venus could both understand and appreciate, this match became flaccid pretty quickly after that hot start. I don't have in front of me the length of this match. I'm assuming it was 37 minutes. So there were worse matches on the show, but they were short. I despised this match. They had about 6 minutes of content that went at least 3 times as long. There are points to where it just feels like they're told kill 5 more minutes, and they just basically almost repeat the same sequences with slightly different moves. No one cares because, again, Val Venus is a completely detestable character without any charm, and Ken Shamrock is in the corporation. He's also a terrible fit for the WWF. Like, that's my takeaway watching this, is how much better Ken Shamrock would have been of a fit in like 97 WCW from a wrestling standpoint than 99 WWF. Like, the only guy that he had good chemistry with was The Rock.
Yeah, totally. Shamrock had Val in an ankle lock. Ryan Shamrock pulls Val to the ropes for the break. Ken goes out to yell at his sister, who forgot to slap him, to where you see Ken Shamrock yell, "Slap me!"
She's if someone told me that she was an animatronic, I would have believed them. Like, she's straight out of the Hall of Presidents at Disney World. Like, she's got one or two movements, no facial expressions. I didn't realize she was like 19 years old. She's basically a kid here at this point, but she just seems completely not cut out for the world of professional wrestling in 1999.
After she slaps Shamrock, he gets in the ring. Val rolls him up in a small package. Billy Gunn, with a fast count, gives Val the win in the IC title. Shamrock attacks Billy after the match. He chases off Shamrock. Billy's back in the ring. He beats up Val Venus. So Val Venus is the new Intercontinental Champion, and Billy Gunn stands tall at the end. Okay.
Yes, that's our reward for all of this. I just want to give a quick selection of my notes from the middle portion of this match that I think will say everything we need to about this. Val Venus hits a body slam and a reverse chinlock. Jesus F. Val with the knee to the midsection, and Cole calls him B.A. Billy Gunn. My next line of notes says, "This won't end," followed by Ken fights back and Val pounds him down in the corner again. All caps, "God, this sucks."
Oh, it was long and boring.
Hated this. This is the only thing in 4 years of doing this, 4 seasons of doing this podcast. The middle third of this match is the only thing that was as boring to me as that Marty Jannetty heat segment on the AWA show from 1987. Like, it was the same thing. Like, I was actively trying to find reasons to turn the TV off, close my laptop, do anything else other than continue to watch this, because it just kept going with no direction. Like, it just meandered, didn't get closer to a finish. It felt like they had 12 minutes of TV time and said, "Hey, get 17 out of it."
All right. Well, now we're past. We've got the top 3 matches here. These were the matches that people were into here. The people were there to see. Let's see how this turns around. We start with DX, D-Generation X, represented by Triple H and X-Pac, taking on the team of Kane and Chyna, representing the corporation. We see a video package of Chyna turning on DX to join the corporation. Shane McMahon comes out to join on commentary.
Oh, God.
And this was unbearable. I know his thing was to be annoying, but this is beyond. This is too much, like way too much. Awful. Just,
you know who it reminded me of? Luscious Johnny V on those 80s WWF tapes. There are a few where he was on commentary. Whoever that guy was with Killer Kowalski on the AWA Wrestling for a Cure
Wrestling
show.
for a Cure in the bonus feed.
Yeah. Like, to your point, he's supposed to be annoying, but he's so much more effective at that than he needed to be. It's to the point to where you want to turn it off. And then I also at that time remembered, because we saw it during this video package, this wasn't just a one-off thing. He was the regular color commentator on Sunday Night Heat.
Ugh. So Triple H and Kane start this match. Triple H has on red and black long tights. He looks literally like Kane's tag team partner. Come on. Like, I know he's got plenty of other gear choices. Red is not even a primary DX color. What are we doing here, people?
My notes
Idiots.
say Triple H is wearing long red and black tights. Jeremy will not be happy.
No, outraged.
I wrote the same thing. These two men look like tag team partners, yet they are punching each other. What is happening? Like,
I'm already mad because Shane's out there. Then I see this aesthetic. What are we doing?
And we're not exaggerating. It's as if Kane.
Same shades.
It's
red.
like Triple H forgot his gear, and Kane said, "Here, I have an extra. I have a spare of the lower half of my gear, of the tights part of my gear." It's so weird. It's almost like it's Kane versus fake Kane or something.
Oh, I was so angry already. So yeah, we've got Chyna getting in there with X-Pac. She gets some shots in, and we're told this is the first time a woman's been allowed to compete in a man's match. Some
Yeah, so
history
this
being
is
made.
not a mixed tag, but an intergender tag in that the men can fight the women can fight the men. But yeah, not it's the first time China's been in a match like this. It's the first time the WWF has had this. I'm trying so hard to focus on that, but instead, Shane McMahon is driving me insane. He keeps calling Jerry Lawler a kingfish over and over again. He's screaming wham, wham, wham over and over and over. It is, in some ways, kind of overshadowing the fact that after the entrances, the crowd is actually really, really quiet for the wrestling portion of this match, which is it's kind of a WWF crowd during that time, which is they react to entrances, they react to catchphrases said on the mic, and they react to guys' signature moves or finishers. But anything else that's just wrestling, that's not what they're here for.
X-Pac's on the outside. He gets a shot in on Shane, and X-Pac is now my new favorite wrestler today. Thank you, X-Pac, for silencing Shane McMahon on commentary.
He goes flying into Shane McMahon. Shane is standing by the broadcast desk, and then he's standing there, and X-Pac just knocks him basically into the timekeeper's area.
Chyna's offense throughout the match was basically forearms, and that's about it. Here, later in the match, she does hit a running power slam on X-Pac. Triple H gets in there with Chyna. He punches her in the face, beats up Kane too.
Her sells of these punches were amazing. She goes flying across the ring just off one punch, and she was clearly not Dean Malenko out there or anything, but I thought she actually, for what she was supposed to be in this match, did a great job. Her forearms looked good. She a couple good running shoulder blocks, body slam, and then, like I said, that punch sell, I was getting off my chair. I'm like, you go, Chyna. This belongs in Memphis. You selling that punch.
It sure did. Kane gets dumped over the top rope to the floor. Triple H hits the high knee to Chyna, but he gets low bridged by Kane. And then X-Pac does his Bronco Buster on Chyna, which was way more popular than I remembered. The place went crazy. Shane then comes in the ring, gets a cheap shot on X-Pac. They run to the back. Kane breaks up a pedigree with a choke slam to Triple H, puts Chyna on top of Triple H. There's no ref. And then a ref finally runs in and makes the 3 count. So Triple H was dead for like a 10 count off this choke slam. Chyna and Kane are your winners.
The weirdest thing about this was we never saw why there was no ref. There was no visual ref bump that I saw.
Yeah, no, he was following the brawling that was going up. So when Kane and X-Pac and Shane were all going up to the entranceway,
why would he not stay in the ring with the legal men? He's like a dog chasing a car here. That didn't work for me at all.
No. We see highlights from the Survivor Series where The Rock turned heel to join Vince McMahon and the WWF and the corporation become the WWF champion. They redid the Montreal Screwjob finish.
God,
this
yeah.
was 98, so this was hot. They had to come right back after 97.
Hey, that didn't stop them from doing it many, many more years after that.
Many times. At the December Rock Bottom pay-per-view, Mankind beat The Rock, but McMahon says that The Rock is still champion. This I did not understand, and I would have been angry if we had to watch that show.
Apparently, it was that Mankind won by referee stoppage, and Vince McMahon said the title can only change hands if it's a pinfall or a submission. Therefore, The Rock is still the champion. But if I'm at a pay-per-view, or if I ordered a pay-per-view,
so angry.
It's one thing. I would still be annoyed if that was on Raw, but whatever, you get it. If I paid money for that, whether it be for a ticket or, pay-per-view, and then I can send in my cable bill and get a photo magnet, I'd be wanting a refund, not just a photo magnet.
They showed that on Raw, there was an explanation on why there was a rematch, and that was because Mankind was stretching Shane on Raw and demanding a title shot. Vince agrees.
I love how Mankind has Shane in like the same stretch that whenever the WWF would have those
Stu Hart video,
the reenactments of Stu Hart's dungeon, where Stu Hart is still 172 years old, but then you've got like kids playing young Brett or young Owen.
Yeah.
It's the move that Mankind has
move.
on Shane here. Literally the move.
He gets a title shot on Raw. So The Rock and Mankind on Raw for the title. Austin shows up, hits Rock with a chair. Mankind ends up winning the title. This was one of the best moments in Raw history. Is Mankind running around celebrating the championship. This was the same night where Nitro gave away the taped results of the title change, which actually backfired on them and sent a bunch of people over to Raw. And it's one of the most famous moments, and still one of the best ones to see even in a clip form here. We do see clips then of the Royal Rumble I Quit match, which is something I never have to see again.
No, which was also immortalized in the Beyond the Mat movie, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
You are
one
correct.
of the most horrific matches ever. I don't care about death matches. I don't care about ECW, whatever you want to talk about. The at least 10 horrific, again, is the only word I can use to describe this, unprotected chair shots with that Mankind took with his arms handcuffed behind his back. Just it was hard to watch back then, but watching it through modern eyes, it feels criminal, literally criminal.
I just the clips, I'm like, oh god, like it was hard to watch. Rock wins the title back. It was a sick match, a super dumb finish.
Yes.
Also for that one with a voiceover I Quit thing. It was stupid.
Well, that was the thing that I remember at the time too. Pissed me off even more was that Mick Foley goes through literal hell. 10 unprotected chair shots directly to the face, and he does that for this finish. Where he's down and they play a recording of him saying "I quit," and that's how he loses.
And he loses the title. He loses the title that way. And
again, another pay-per-view with that type of finish. Would have been unhappy if I had paid for it.
Well, that same Royal Rumble was won by Vince McMahon, so you would have really been.
Oh god, it's as bad as WCW was getting at that point. From my own personal taste and my own personal sanity, I made the right decision not ordering WWF pay-per-views late 98, early 99.
They had an empty arena match at Halftime Heat during the Super Bowl halftime show where Mankind pins The Rock using a forklift to win the title again. So we've had, like, they flip-flopped this title, like, 4 times in a month. So
maybe it was an homage. As they were heading toward Memphis, it was an homage to the USWA title changes that would take place on like a weekly basis when Papa Shango would come in and beat Jerry Lawler and then lose it the next week. And then Mabel would do the same. Also on that Halftime Heat show, Vince McMahon was doing play-by-play for that match, which totally threw me, hearing him doing like not heel Vince McMahon, but doing Vince McMahon play-by-play voice. Very weird.
WWF Championship last man standing match. The champion Mankind defending against the challenger, The Rock. The rules. Answer the 10 count. If you can't answer the 10 count, you lose. If you're down, the ref's going to start counting. If you get up before 10, match continues. If you do not get up before 10, match is over. That's the rules. I didn't need a graphic to explain that there's going to be pinfalls that will trigger a count, but the pinfalls don't count. Just so the
rules were very simple for this, as opposed
Cactus Jack, Mankind, Mick Foley, with some lessons learned from the Halloween Havoc '94 Texas Death Match against Vader.
Yes, 93.
93.
But yes, in that show that we reviewed over in the bonus content, where it was a Texas Death Match, which is a last man standing match, but to trigger the 10 count, you first had to score a pinfall, but the pinfalls didn't count. But once you scored the pinfall that didn't count, to trigger the 10 count, there was first, in between these things, a 30-second rest period.
I forgot about the rest period.
Then the referee would start counting to 10, whether you would get up or not. And then all that was blown out anyway for the actual finish.
Go subscribe to the Patreon. Listen to the Halloween Havoc episode that's up there, and you will hear us talk in great detail about the confusion of that match. Good news, this match, very straightforward. Just got to get up before the 10 count.
Never let it be said that I'm not a fair man, because I loved WCW for all their faults. I hated the WWF. Still not a fan of the WWE at all. And I can admit the WWF got this right and WCW didn't.
Mankind starts the match by turning his back to The Rock, and The Rock just hammers away to the loud chants of Rocky sucks. Mankind hits The Rock with a belt shot to the head, but The Rock is able to beat the 10 count. He's up at 8. They fight back by the stage. They're thrown into lighting structures in the entranceway. And then they battle over to a table where they've got like the tech area where they have like some monitors and some stuff on a table. And Mankind and The Rock and stuff on the table are all there. And I'm like, oh, this table is terrifying. And then Mankind DDTs The Rock. The table breaks. Monitors fall on top of them.
Yeah, they did not do, and granted, this wasn't the broadcast table, but still, when you're going to go through a table that has monitors, the first thing you do is clear the monitors off, because if you don't, what happened here is exactly what will happen. The DDT occurred, the table caves in as a table does, and then those monitors are just on a slide down, and they slide directly into each guy's heads. The one monitor just stays laying on The Rock's head. This looked bad. This is also, we should mention, the Rock wrestling in his silk pajamas era of the Great One, as I think this was either as he was going to or was about to have his surgery on his chest, his cosmetic surgery, and that was the solution. It certainly looked silly, though.
It was fine in a context of a last man standing, like a street fight type of match. I was okay.
It was less offensive in this context. I would have been better if he would have had a knee pad or two over the silk pajamas to really complete the look. But yeah, it was very strange in a regular wrestling match to see him wearing that sort of gear.
Rock hits a belly to back suplex on the concrete, deceptively brutal after the table break spot. Back in the ring, Mankind does the people's elbow, but The Rock moves out of the way. Never doesn't get a chuckle from me when Mick Foley's doing a people's elbow or doing other people's moves. The Rock suplexes Mankind on the floor 3 times, and then he
gets on commentary. He goes
puts
over the
headset on to just talk trash to Foley
to call his own match, as The Rock does.
Foley gets up before the 10 count and then throws himself across the table onto The Rock, starts beating The Rock down.
This is my favorite part of the match, this beatdown by Foley on The Rock, because it's Foley throwing those awesome, like, short forearm type of punches, and Rock is just godlike selling this with a look on his face, and, like, with each punch, he sinks down maybe, like, 3 inches lower and lower and lower before he just disappears under the table. Tremendous masterclass stuff here by both guys.
No, watching him struggle to be stuck between the announce table and the guardrail is fantastic Rock here. So Rock is put on the announce table. He's hanging. His top half of his body is hanging over the announce table. Mankind off the apron drops an elbow where Mankind lands on the floor, hitting the elbow on The Rock. He then tumbles off the table. Brutal, just brutal. Everybody, it's one of those, like, doesn't make a big noise, but you just saw everyone is hurt.
Well, it looked like it would hurt even more than when he would normally do that, the Cactus Jack elbow off the apron, because
there's nobody there.
Yeah, at least the guy's body, the opponent's body, would cushion the blow, take some of the impact. Here, it's pretty damn far away from the apron. So he's not only is he doing it, like, he's having to reach out to make contact with The Rock, but it's mostly just his body hitting concrete.
In the ring, The Rock starts hitting Mankind in the injured knee with a chair. Rock misses a chair shot. It bounces off the ropes, hitting The Rock in the face. Mankind clotheslines the dazed Rock over the top to the floor, where he's throwing his whole body in and goes over with him.
Yep, the cactus clothesline. Thankfully, no one's ear got taken off in the midst of this one.
Mankind goes to pile drive the Rock on the announce table. Rock backdrops him. Mankind falls between the announce table and the timekeeper's little tiny table, where his legs hit the his legs hit the timekeeper table. The back of his head hits the announce table. I screamed in terror when he backdropped him into oblivion here.
No, this is one of the few times where Cole actually did a great job here, just screaming no, no, no as this was happening. Watching it, I half expected when the camera went over to him afterwards that all that would be left would be torso, that his head was torn off and that his legs were sheared off of his body. This was terrifying. You talked about like stealth, really, really brutal spots with that back suplex. This is another one of the more brutal spots I've ever seen Foley take, which that covers a lot of ground. Then the ref is counting Foley down. Rock is back in the ring. He picks up the steps, which are still in the ring, and throws the steps over the top rope onto Foley's like head and hip. This is great as far as like drama, but Michael Cole, he is not Jim Ross.
Nope.
This happens, and what does Michael Cole scream? God darn it.
And then he tries to tell us those stairs are 300 pounds or whatever.
Yes, they're 285 pounds. But God darn it, just somehow didn't tug at the heartstrings like, as God is my witness, he's broken in half.
Mankind beats the 10 count again. The Rock in the ring hits the corporate elbow, which is his heel version of the people's elbow. He grabs the mic, tells the ref to count quicker, tells us he's the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, then starts singing SmackDown Hotel to the tune of Heartbreak Hotel here in Memphis.
What I wish he had done instead was sing somehow a cappella the select screen music from No Mercy. SmackDown Hotel. You hear that 500 times when you're creating a wrestler.
Mankind reaches up, puts on the mandible claw so you can hear Rock with Mankind's hand in his mouth yelling into the microphone.
Such a great touch. Like in the I Quit matches where like Funk and Flair, and you can really hear them yelling at each other. It's some good like drama, but also borderline comedy. Same thing here.
Ref gets bumped, and the Rock is out from the mandible claw, but no referee to make the count. Mankind helps the ref count, but the Rock is able to beat the 10. A double arm DDT on the chair, but Rock gets up at 9. Then he pulls out Mr. Sacco and puts the mandible claw on again. Mr. Sacco very over. The crowd went absolutely insane for that. The Rock bottom by the Rock. Both men get up. Both men get chairs. They hit each other at the same time, knocking each other out simultaneously. The ref begins the 10 count. Both men are down. No one can answer the 10 count. This match is a draw. So still the champion is Mankind. The crowd hated this finish.
I hate them. I loved this. This was, if you're going to have a draw, this was done so well.
I thought so too. I thought this was super creative.
And the way they did it wasn't like, it was like a Mike Awesome, Masato Tanaka, where they're like a chair duel. They're swinging it. They hit the chairs, hit each other, and then they each hit each other with the chair. They were both down. They each had a chair near them. They, they're exhausted. They desperately pick up the chair, and then they each, in like a last gasp of energy, run toward each other, swing the chairs, hit each other at the same time, and both go out. This was like a pro wrestling version of Rocky. I loved it.
Yeah, they were both. Like, it's not like this was early in the match. This was like they were both spent, exhausted, beaten down to where like a single move could put them away, and so both of them hitting that at the same time put them both away. They're both taken out on stretchers, both put into ambulances, and off they go. So this was
awesome.
I love this match.
Yeah, I'll just say now, this is by far my favorite thing on the show. Rock and Foley, obviously the chair shots from the previous match aside, just incredible chemistry as characters, much less as wrestlers. I also give The Rock a ton of credit. Maybe it was because he was feeling guilty over the match at Survivor Series, but like, he took a lot in this match, a lot more than I would have expected. A lot of times you see guys do these type of matches with Foley and they take a bunch of safe stuff and Foley dies. And this was not quite as far to that level as we've seen with other guys. So yeah, just fantastic stuff here.
Rock would eventually get the title back at the next Raw. At the following week's Raw. So that is so Rock will be the champion going into WrestleMania. We see clips of Mr. McMahon winning the Royal Rumble, dumping Austin to win the Royal Rumble. We get a Austin McMahon video package, which was awesome. Seeing a lot of the highlights of that feud. Just it's one of, if not like the best long-term story that they've done, right up there with the Mega Powers. I think is the Austin McMahon feud at this point. And
the perfect personalities as far as the antagonist and protagonist, all that sort of stuff. I love the video package. The only thing about it that confused me was Shawn Michaels like the figurehead WWF commissioner at this point? He's here, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, he had just gotten his career-ending back surgery, so they were finding a new role for him. So he had just started as this de facto commissioner.
Because this was right around the time, like when that ended, or right around that time, he went over to FMW and refereed the Mr. Ganasuke versus Hayabusa as H match in FMW, and I just remember it being such a bizarre thing at the time, and like buying the tape from the video stand at Gurney Mills Mall in suburban Chicago, because I had to see Shawn Michaels refereeing a Mr. Ganasuke match in FMW. It was so weird.
The main event, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Mr. McMahon in a steel cage. Steve Austin will finally get his hands on Vince McMahon. This is the payoff for this long buildup that's been going on for a long time. This is it.
For years.
Yes, Austin's finally going to get to work with Vince and finally get his hands on him.
And Vince, one of the main stories coming into this match that we haven't mentioned yet is that Vince McMahon personally guaranteed that no member of the corporation would interfere in this match, and if they did, they would be fired. So the idea going into this is that it's Vince McMahon versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, finally settling the score, and it'll just be one-on-one in the confines of a steel cage.
Austin comes out extremely popular. Like I forget sometimes what a superstar reaction looks like.
Yes.
Ooh, baby. When he comes out, this is something. Blows the roof off the dump.
And it's also one of the things that it's maybe the moment where I'm happiest about the way this show is shot and the way the arena is lit, because you really can see, whether it be the people ringside or the people in the last row of the upper deck, everyone is standing on their feet going crazy for Austin.
McMahon comes out and he stalls for a long time. He won't get in the cage. He's stalling. Austin goes out.
Larry Zbyszko, but with charisma.
Yeah, Austin goes out after him. Vince gets in the cage. Austin tries to get in. Vince won't let him in. Austin drops off the side of the cage and injures his knee. To where Vince gets excited. He comes out to try to get some shots in on a now injured Austin. And Austin was totally faking it, suckered him in, and he attacks Vince. Austin's choking him with the camera cable, dumps Vince into the first row of the crowd, beats him up there. He's destroying him all around the ring. Vince and Austin fight into the crowd, up the stairs, back to the ringside area. More Austin beatdown. Vince is taking a beating like a champ. This is everything that everybody wanted to see. They're getting their money's worth here. Vince starts to climb the side of the cage. and Austin follows him up. And they get to the top of the cage, and Austin rams Vince's head into the top of the cage. And Vince McMahon falls backward off the cage through the Spanish announce table, but he bounces on this table before the table collapses. And as the table collapses, the monitors are still on the table. I'm like,
Yeah.
ouch. That was an incredible bump for a non-wrestler at this point. Remember, Vince has not wrestled a match at this point. He's a non-wrestler. To
Well, he
do
had to
that
cover
spot, incredible.
a lot of distance from the about 3/4 of the way up this cage, which was not 20 feet up, no matter what Michael Cole said. But to cover like horizontally going across to make it to that announce table, like you said, brutal spot. We should mention, as far as the cage itself, it's not the blue bar steel cage, but it's also not the fenced steel cage, which we've seen, in WCW and Crockett Promotions, and we would see later on in the WWF in Hell in the Cell and other things. It's a black bar version of the blue bar cage, and this is an escape the cage match. This is escape the cage. Whenever they finally do get in the ring, you have to either go through the door or go over the top. There are no pinfalls. There are no submissions.
Austin's in the ring, and a stretcher comes out with the medical team to take a look at Vince. It takes forever to get him on a stretcher, and then Howard Finkel's about to announce that Austin is the winner, but Austin grabs the mic, says that's bullshit. This match never started. We were never in the ring. He is not going to lose that easy. He says, is the son of a bitch still breathing?
It's great, too, because the production here is awesome. He says it, and then it immediately switches to the camera shot of like these 10 people around Vince just disgusted that Steve Austin just asked that question.
He asked the crowd, if you want me to finish this can of whoop ass, give me a hell yeah. The people want it. They gave a hell yeah. And Austin goes out. He grabs the gurney that Vince McMahon is strapped to, runs it down the ramp, and Vince goes flying into the cage. Austin puts Vince into the cage. He follows him in, and now the bell rings and the match officially begins. We're at least 15 minutes into this.
At least. And you talked about cartoon violence earlier in the hardcore title match. This spot that you described where Vince is on the gurney and he gets high speed wheeled down the ramp and flipped into the cage. This is like wild Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote stuff. This is fantastic.
So we're in there. The match begins. Loud Austin chants as he's beating down Vince in the cage. He goes to walk out of the cage to easily win this match, and Vince McMahon sticks up a middle finger at Steve Austin. Austin does not touch the floor. He walks right back in that cage. He continues to beat Vince down some more. Vince hits a low blow, actually is able to send Austin into the cage. He starts climbing out of the cage. He actually gets over the cage, but Austin's up. He grabs him. He's got Vince teetering on top of the cage. Austin dumps Vince back into the ring the hard way. Vince gets thrown into the cage and he is busted open. He starts bleeding all over the place.
Which is hilarious because even back then, you weren't seeing a lot of blood in the WWF, but Vince McMahon, he's allowed. He can bust himself open. He can blade. The rules that do not apply to him.
No, and he was bleeding everywhere here. Austin, then he's going over the cage, climbing down, but Vince McMahon flips him off this time with two middle fingers while bleeding. A very cool visual. Great production.
He is out, basically. He is over the cage.
He could have won this match.
He is, as far as like where he is on the cage, he's like below the edge of the ring apron. Like he's one step away from being done punching his ticket to WrestleMania. But Vince wants more, so he comes back in, and the crowd is going nuts with every step that Austin wildly takes, walking up the cage and walking back in. They have seen Vince McMahon do evil Vince McMahon things for so long now, every single week, that it's not just one punch. It's not Vince's blood. there is no amount of beating that Vince McMahon could take in this match that would be enough for these fans here in Memphis tonight.
Yeah, he gets back in, punishes him some more, hits a stunner. And at this point, the Giant, Paul White, the future Big Show, busts through the ring.
Cuts his way through the ring like he's a ninja from my youth. I remembered this, but I did not remember that's how he came in. We should also mention, as far as the crowd, before Austin hit the stunner, there were thousands of children. They were children's voices chanting stunner, stunner, stunner. Like, it took me a good 10, 15 seconds to figure out what they were chanting. And then I realized that's what it was.
So the Giant jumping from WCW to the WWF here, busts through the ring, attacks Austin. He picks up Austin and throws him into the cage. The cage breaks. The side of the cage breaks. It goes swinging out. Austin drops off the cage, hits the floor, and Steve Austin is your winner. He's going to WrestleMania to face The Rock for the championship. Vince weeping in the ring as Paul White looks on ominously, and the show goes off the air. This, tons of fun. Everybody got exactly what they wanted. Vince McMahon didn't have a long heat segment where he's beating up on Austin or got an advantage through somehow and was no, like, he just took an ass whipping for the entire match. And that was, it was great. It was everything that people wanted. Austin won. Everybody was happy. The Paul White is here. The Giant has jumped over from WCW. And yeah, it was the last two matches were exactly what you needed on this show to keep this from being an all-time ECW December to Dismember level of terrible. Those two matches saving this show.
Yeah, no, the main event was barely even a match. It was an extended angle beat down, but that's what no one is going to this expecting to see Flair versus Steamboat. You saw Austin beat the hell out of Vince McMahon. Multiple teases of it being over, and then Austin coming back for more, and the fans always being ready for it. You had what everyone loved during that time period, which was a major shock debut of someone jumping from one side to the other. And then you had a really crazy creative finish with, as you said, Paul White holding Austin in his arms like he's cradling a baby, and then just tossed him through the air at the cage. Austin lands on the cage. The cage swings like a door. He rides it like this was something out of like American Ninja Warrior or American Gladiators. Austin gets on the floor, retains his title shot. So yeah, I mean, you got everything you wanted. The other thing about this, though, is it immediately made me think of like how great this debut of, as they called him, Paul White on this show was, and how immediately botched everything was with him. After that, he did not have an official name for the first little while. He was Paul White on this show. He was the Big Nasty for a couple weeks.
He had a shirt after his debut that just said "No gimmicks needed."
Yes. And then they called him, like, his official name on the show for a week or two was the Big Nasty. Then they settled on the Big Show. And as far as matches, so he has a match on Raw, goes to a no contest with The Rock. They have a match on Raw a month later, Mankind and Austin against Paul White and The Rock, no contest. Then on Raw, not even on a pay-per-view, March 22nd, Steve Austin, clean as a sheet, defeats the Big Show, Paul White, the Big Nasty, the Giant, whatever you want to call him at that point. I remember just being aghast. Like, how do you debut that guy, do that angle, and then you just have him lose to Austin right away? To me, he never fully recovered from that. He was never the threat.
They were always trying to make him a thing after all that for decades.
Yes, they after the opportunity they had, they failed on so miserably, and then he'd just be a guy, and then they'd be like, oh, we need someone. Let's make him a big deal for a month. That was that weird time where he was on Saturday Night Live and then everyone thought he was hilarious. So then he was doing all these stupid gimmicks for a couple months. Just when you look at how he was presented here, it's amazing how much they dropped the ball over the course of the next few months.
Dave Meltzer, the Wrestling Observer newsletter, reports that the 53-year-old Vince McMahon here, who had never worked a lengthy match, was out there for 19 minutes between a lengthy pre-match brawl and an actual cage match. Took one of the craziest bumps you'll see and was far less limited as a performer than anyone had the right to expect. There were moments where reality set in, and the match was clearly based on the philosophy of the Undertaker versus Mankind Hell in a Cell match. That as long as there are two big spots to remember, it doesn't matter if nothing happens in between or after. But for the most part of the match was better than most WCW main events involving experienced and younger full-time wrestlers.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that when you think of some of the WCW pay-per-view main events or even Nitro main events featuring Hogan or Piper or that Hogan Savage match from earlier this season from that Nitro episode where Savage was completely shot, multiple injuries, and Hogan had to lead the match. This was, I mean, Vince, he wasn't Ricky Steamboat in there, but he had great timing. He was completely comfortable. I mean, not that you would expect Vince McMahon to not have great facial expressions and mannerisms, but it was a very impressive performance from a guy that I think, like you said, it was reasonable to have no expectations for going in.
Yeah, I will join you with the Mankind Rock match as my favorite thing on this show by far. Worst thing on this show, there's so much to choose from. But man,
for me, it's Shamrock and Val Venus, because there's no scenario where Blue Dust versus Gold Dust on a pay-per-view is going to be
short.
good.
That felt so long and boring, and it started so promising.
Exactly.
And all the Billy Gunn antics. You're absolutely correct. That is that's the worst thing. Going back and recapping it, that's the worst thing. It was hard for me to get over Triple H and Kane in matching gear, but I will agree with you that it's Shamrock and Val Venus is the worst.
Well, because there's to expand on that briefly, there's many scenarios where Ken Shamrock and Val Venus could have a perfectly acceptable, bordering on good intercontinental title match. Whereas the other matches, the opener, Blue Dust versus Gold Dust, Midian versus Big Boss Man, there's no scenario in which those could have been good, and they weren't, but at least they're mercifully short. This could have and should have been good. It started off hot, and then it was one of the worst matches we've ever reviewed on this podcast. So it's absolutely, for me, is the worst thing on this show.
Interact with the show. Tell us what you think of the show via Twitter at WrestleAtRandom. Same for Instagram, Facebook.com/WrestlingAtRandom as well. Tell us what you think. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, if you prefer to consume your podcast via the visual medium instead of the audio, you can do that via YouTube. If you're there, interact with the show via comments in the YouTube. Or if you are a subscriber to the audio version of this podcast as well, you can we rely on your support. You can support the show by telling your wrestling fan friends about the show. Show them how to subscribe to a podcast. If you want to check out the visual portion of the show as an audio subscriber, you can search the YouTube for Wrestling at Random podcast. That'll pull up the entire season 4 video versions of this podcast. And like we mentioned a couple times throughout the show, we've got bonus content every single week. We put out a bonus episode of this podcast. It's available to you at patreon.com/wrestlingatrandom. There's multiple tiers. The basic tier, you unlock all of the bonus content, almost 100 episodes extra that you haven't heard yet. It's all out there. You can go listen to it. Again, it's evergreen content. Go out there, listen to it, check it out. And there's tiers where you can be the randomizer. You can be the intentionalizer and tell us what you want us to watch, and we will review it for the bonus content. It's all there. Give it a check. Go ahead and check it out. If you're in Apple Podcasts right now listening, you should see it in your feed. Go check it out. Give us a listen. And if I think those are the best ways to support the show. If you can't, like I said, tell your wrestling fan friends about the show. Show them how to subscribe to a podcast. Tell tell anyone who will listen. We're trying to expand the reach of this podcast, and that's the best way is for you to continue to spread the word.
Well, and think about with the bonus feed, if you're a longtime listener and you've listened to 3 and now into the 4th season of this show, over in the bonus feed, there are almost as many episodes as we've done in the free feed, all that you've never heard. So you have basically an alternate history of this podcast that you've never heard waiting for you in the bonus feed. Like Jeremy said, just 1 month unlocks the entire thing. You can go back and listen to whatever you want. It is quite the value. And we should mention also on the bonus feed that as we started doing video podcasts on the free feed, if you're a bonus subscriber, those bonus shows have video as well for the past however many 7 or 8 that we've done if you're listening in linear fashion, and you get that link as well that you can listen to and watch.
Yep, it's all there. So with that, we want to thank our patrons. We want to thank the randomizer. I want to thank you, Adam, for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Jeremy. I will say that while the opening portion of this show was not good, in the vintage words of Michael Cole, God darn it, I'm happy we got to watch those last 2 matches and talk about them here on the show.
Me as well. So thanks everyone for listening, and we will talk to you again next time.